Things that go whoop in the night. Henry's forest was being cleared of felled trees. To prevent holding up mainline traffic, the trees were taken to a nearby halt to be loaded onto flatbeds for James to take to the timber mill. The halt had been abandoned for many years and was covered in mould and ivy. "This place gives me the willies," James would mutter. One evening, James went to pick up another train of logs, but he was so distracted with the halt that he didn't notice a stray log on the line. With a loud thump, James's front wheels came off the rails. His crew went for help and returned quite soon. "Edward's bringing the breakdown train in the morning," they said. "Morning?" fumed James, but there was nothing he could do. Night came, and James was starting to feel uncomfortable. He began to feel he wasn't alone. His thoughts were broken off by a strange whooping noise in the distance. "Who's there?" he demanded. No one replied. The noise grew louder, and the halt seemed to loom menacingly over him. Frightened, James closed his eyes tight. Next morning, Edward arrived to help re-rail James. The red engine was telling him about what he had heard. "I don't know what I heard, but I'm not coming back here again," he exclaimed. "Well, James," began Edward, "the truth is, what you heard was actually—" "Nothing more than nonsense," interrupted Henry. "You probably just heard an animal of some sort. Stop being such a scaredy engine." James was furious. "If you're so brave, why don't you pick up the logs instead and see for yourself?" "All right then," said Henry smugly. "I will." That night, Henry arrived at the halt. "Nothing to it," he scoffed. As the workman loaded his flatbeds, he listened for any strange sounds. But the only thing Henry could hear was the halt creaking in the wind. All of a sudden, Henry didn't feel so brave anymore. Somehow, he felt as though the old building was cross. Its boarded-up windows started staring in his smoke box. "There's no such thing as ghosts," he muttered. "You're just imagining things." Then, Henry heard a loud whooping sound in the distance. "That's not my imagination," he cried. Then Henry saw a man run out onto the line, stopping to catch his breath. He was dressed in a flannel and looked rather young. The workmen held their breath. "Hello," stammered Henry. "Who are you? What are you running away from?" Suddenly, a light flicked on inside the halt and began to move. Its ominous glow accompanied by the sound of footsteps. At once, the man let out the same whooping noise from earlier and ran back the way he came. Henry was speechless and raced back to the sheds. James and Edward were resting in the sheds when Henry hurried in, shaking like a leaf. "Scaredy engine," scoffed James. But he spoilt the effect when Edward shot him a stern look. "What happened, Henry?" asked the old engine kindly. Still shaking, Henry told Edward what he'd seen. "I don't know what I saw, but I'm sure that halt is haunted," he quavered. Edward sighed. "Well, you're not wrong," he said. "There's a reason that halt's been abandoned for so long." James and Henry fell silent. Many years ago, loggers used that halt to transfer logs from their camps onto our wagons. One day, a new lumberjack came to start work, but unfortunately, after a dispute with a rather villainous group of loggers, they decided to enact revenge, and one night, they chased the man into the woods. The man whooped loudly to hopefully attract the attention of anyone nearby, but no help came. The next day, an engine found the man's body in the nearby river. Henry and James gasped in horror. The loggers were never brought to justice, continued Edward, and after a few years, the logging camp and the halt closed down. But ever since that dark night, many have said they have seen the loggers' lantern shining from inside the halt, the man running into the woods, and his loud whooping sounds, desperate for help. Sadly, help never comes. James and Henry were speechless, and as the moon shone high in the starry night, a familiar, unfortunate whooping sound could be heard from the distance.